So if you are working with IsaacSim or Omniverse, you are probably working with USD daily. And the better you understand USD, the more you can do with Omniverse. So this is not the path I took, but if I was to advise a friend on the best way to learn USD simply and easily, this would be the path I would suggest. And it'll go from beginner through intermediate to beginner advanced. So let me break it down. Okay, so what you see here is on the left, what we're going to go through, then some notes on each item, and then what you're going to get from that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through the resources you're going to need just as a reference. So that'll be the USD GitHub repo, the Pixar USD user docs and API docs, and the Omniverse USD site. And you'll use these as needed in the beginning, and it's a place to refer back to. Then I'm going to tell you about this amazing course from NVIDIA. It's made up of 7 courses. It's called the USD Foundations. And you're going to start off with learning about stages, prims, and attributes. And by the end, you'll understand animations and strength ordering. So that's quite a lot and a very, very good foundation. So you'll get a solid foundation of the basics. And the amazing thing about that is it's all done with Jupyter notebooks, no installations, and most of these courses are under an hour. So if you set aside a day, you could pretty much get through all 7 of these courses. And from the very first module, you'll be running actual code without any installations. Then the next course I would suggest after that is definitely more complicated. It's called Creating Composition Arcs, and it'll go over a lot of the same stuff, but in more detail. And it'll cover a few extra things. So it'll go over layers and sublayers, references and payloads. I'm sure these are all things you have heard of or had a little bit of exposure to. And right at the end, it'll go through the liver peas strength ordering in a lot of detail. And for this, you're going to have to install USD View. And you're not spoon-fed on this one. This one, you really have to dive in, and you're going to be working with some Python code. So it's more practice of the basics. You get to understand under the hood what's happening, and now you're getting into intermediate and a few advanced topics. After that, I would suggest doing the fundamentals of working with OpenUSD. This one is done with Omniverse, so you'll either have to have Omniverse Kit app installed or IsaacSim, and this is where you're going to put all of it into action. You are going to build a full factory. It's going to be composed of many, many files, and you get all the foundations above and actual working with it with a beautiful visual factory that you're going to build from the ground up. And also because you're working with the individual bits and pieces, it's going to give you that familiarity you need. Then lastly, there's this developing data exchange pipelines. It's not essential, but I really enjoyed it. And what you're going to do is you're going to take a .obj file and convert it into a USD, or excuse the typo there, a USDA file. And the good thing about that is you get to understand all the data structures and the file structure of USD. To be able to do this and convert each of these data structures, you really have to understand it well. So not essential, but I got a lot out of this course. And then what you'll do is you'll circle back and you'll come back to the resources, which will now make a lot more sense, because if you try and jump into these right in the beginning, they are a bit overwhelming. But once you've done all these courses, these resources will make a lot more sense. And then what I'd do is I'd go through every one of the items, just skim through it all on this. So all of the menu items, all of the options, you don't have to read it unless it's of interest, but at least you know it's there. So you'll get a knowledge of where everything is and what's actually available when you need it. Now, this is the first of a series of video tutorials I'm going to be doing. This is my OpenUSD video series, and this is my outline. It's still a little bit in the rough, but I've got the first 20 scripts written, and I'm covering things like what is a stage, what is a prim, what is an X-form, all the way. And you can see sort of some of the content here. Now, this is not a replacement for the courses, because the courses will give you the actual hands-on. You're going to work with the code. But these are short visual demos of the atomic concepts. So, yep, let me take you through now in a little bit of detail each of these courses. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump firstly into this OpenUSD Foundation and give you an idea of how it's structured. Let's look at that now. Okay, and one thing I forgot to mention is I will leave links to all of this in the description. So scrolling back to the top, let us start with our 4 resources. So here is the GitHub repo, Pixar Animation Studios, OpenUSD. Just have a quick little scroll through this, and you will see below here is the instructions for installing the USD viewer, which we'll get into much later. But here, starting off, is the user documentation and tutorials. So you'll see here are the user docs, FAQs. Yeah, so for these tutorials, you can come back to them right at the end if they interest you, but the course content I'm going to take you through from NVIDIA is actually going to cover all of this. But some of these are fun and are worth doing right at the end. Next thing is your API docs. Again, this is going to be quite overwhelming at this point, but at least you know they're here if you want to look them up. And then lastly, here is our Omniverse USD portal. And there's a lot of interesting stuff. Again, quite complicated before you've gotten the fundamentals under your belt. So at least you know it's here, and we're going to circle back to this later. Now, coming back to the next step, which is the foundations set of 7 courses. Let's have a look at that. You can see here is the Learn OpenUSD learning path, and here are the foundation series. And we can see course 1 through course 7. As I mentioned, the first one starting about learning about stages, prims, attributes, moving through a whole bunch of different topics and ending off with animations and strength ordering. Now, what I want to do is give you a little bit of a taste of how these courses are run. So I've clicked into the first one, and we can see it gives the details. It says it's an hour 30. The others are less than an hour, although I spent more than that time on them because I really wanted to take my time. So once you've gone into here, if you haven't enrolled on the course, it'll give you an option here to enroll. I've already enrolled. And once we're into the course, this is what you'll see. Now, I want to show you what is so cool about the way this has been set up. It's got the Jupyter notebook. What you're going to do is you're going to click on the start, and that's going to start loading. Now, that will prepare your Jupyter notebook. And then what's going to happen is you're going to go through each of the exercises. So you'll go to module 1, creating an OpenUSD stage. You'll get an overview, you'll get a couple of lectures, and then you'll go into the activity, which is where you will open the Jupyter notebook. Okay, I'm just waiting for that to load. I'm going to fast forward this while this loads. It takes about 2 minutes. Okay, so our notebook is ready to launch. So I'm going to click the launch button. And just within a few seconds, our beautiful Jupyter notebook all ready to go will be started. And as I mentioned here, by this time you would have already done the first few lectures, and you're going to jump straight into the activity. Now, just want to give you an idea of how simple it is. So we're going to pretend like we've gone through those, and we're going to click into that first notebook, and we've got little cells that we just need to run. So this is just going to be the setup. We're going to push Shift Enter, and that's going to load our dependencies. And then we can see here's our activity 1, creating a USD file. And what it does is it gives us a little instruction here. Add the following code to the cell below, then run the cell. So we are going to follow the instructions. We're going to click copy, and then we're going to paste the code where it tells us to. And then we are going to push Shift Enter. And then it has created our first USD file. And we can see if we look under task, assets, first stage.usd, we're going to see assets. We're going to see first stage.usd 12 seconds ago. And then if we look into activity number 2, this is where we're actually going to define our first prim on the stage. We're going to copy the code, and we are going to paste that, and we are going to push Shift Enter, and we're going to see it's actually going to load. There is our cube. So we've got an online USD viewer, and it shows you our USD structure, the file structure, and the whole course is done in this way, where you go through a module, you have an overview, a lecture, and an activity. So as you can see, the beautiful thing is you jump straight in there, and literally within the first few minutes, you're working with USD. So I'm going to go ahead and close this Jupyter notebook. Okay, let's leave. And then just remember, you only have a certain amount of time. You've only got a full 12 hours for each course. So when you're not using the notebooks, you go ahead and click Stop Task. Otherwise, you run out of time. And as I mentioned, that's a taste of what each of the courses will be like. All 7 of these courses run in the exact same structure. All right, going back to our next step, once you've done those foundations, you're going to move on to the course called Creating Composition Arcs. And here is our Creating Composition Arcs course. It says 3 hours. Again, I probably spent 6 or 7 because I really wanted to take my time. And this is the one where you are going to install the USD viewer. And it's going to go over a lot of those same things, but in a lot more detail. So layers and sublayers all the way through to your liver piece strength ordering. And by the end of this course, you're going to feel a lot more familiar, understanding under the hood what's happening, and you will have been focusing on intermediate and even a few advanced topics. The next one is Fundamentals of Working with OpenUSD. This one to me is the most fun course because you're actually working with a real factory and some actual items that look like the real world. So let's have a look at this. Fundamentals of Working with OpenUSD. It says 2 hours. Again, I spent many more hours on it because I really wanted to take my time. And this one you will need Omniverse or Isaac Sim, and you're going to build USD components, utilize variants on a stage, and you're going to have this aggregated finished USD scene. And as I said, this really was my favorite one because you get so hands-on with it. In fact, on my channel, I do have a video where I actually walk you through all of this so you get an idea of what it looks like. But again, do the course, that's where you're actually going to learn it. And then lastly, as I mentioned, developing data exchange pipelines. They're not essential one, but if you've got the time, do it. So here, developing data exchange pipelines, and let's look at what it covers. So data exchange, data extraction, asset validation, and data transformation. But basically the bottom line is you get one format of file, you open that up and you take all the data structures and you pull it into a USD file, and then it gives you a few other bits of code where you can check if a USD file has got valid structure. So you really get to see under the hood what the data structures look like and what a USD file is composed of down to the last little minute details. Then, as I said, I would suggest coming back to the resources because you're going to have a lot of context now and then start going through it. So you can come back to the GitHub repo, just make sure you're very familiar with everything here. You probably will have done this installing USD View already, so that you'll be familiar with, but you'll come back here to the USD official user docs. All of these FAQs, some of which are quite complicated, you can go through. And then the USD tutorials, I would do the first few here. I did most of these tutorials. They were actually quite interesting and they made a lot of sense once I had the grounding from NVIDIA. And then even more importantly, click through to the API docs and start to be familiar. The API is massive and it's way more than there's just covered in these courses and that I'll be covering. But at least you know where anything you might be looking for is going to be sitting. And then again, come back to Omniverse USD, and again, a lot of detail in here, but I would go through every one of these menu items and make sure you know what's there. But again, I would go through every one of these menu items, even if you don't read it, just see what's in there. So at some point in the future, if you're looking for something, you know the content sits there. And then lastly, as I mentioned, this is the first in a series of videos that I will be doing, which are just short visual demos of atomic concepts. And I will be working on that for this week. Okay, and from me and Cassie, sleeping in the background there, thanks for watching. And if you've got some good information out of this video, please consider liking or subscribing, and I'll see you in the next video. Ciao.